God. So, what we need to understand is that we are in an evolutionary upheaval. And the significance about evolution is, what the hell is evolution? Well, we know that some changes have occurred over time, but what is evolution? And if I give you the story of evolution so you can know what's going on, then you can evolve faster if you know where we're going. Okay? So we go back in time. And back in 1650, Francis Bacon was a philosopher and a scientist, and he gave us the mission of modern science. Modern science, to obtain knowledge that can be used to dominate and control nature. Well, how's that working out? Yes, clearly we made a mistake in here somewhere because it's not working. That who are we to control nature when we are nature? We came from nature. And if you destroy the rest of nature, then we can't be here either. People don't recognize that. Oh, they just say, we're going to go to another planet. I go, daydreaming, night dreaming, not reality. You are here. And the point about it is this: why would you go to another planet when you landed on a place that is one of the most beautiful places in the universe? Nature is so beautiful. And so I always laugh about it, like those religious people that say, well, after we destroy the place, God's going to give us another place. I go, what kind of parent would God be to say, yeah, go ahead and destroy it, I'll give you a new one? No. We're supposed to be taking care of this place. We are caretakers, we are creators. And I hope we understand this, because then we can move out of the problems that we live in today's world. Okay? So, control. That's what everybody wants, is control. And yet it's in the hands of a very few number of people. And the rest of us are suffering because of them. And I want everybody to wake up, because each one of you, as I said, is a creator. And so there's always been this duality of creation versus evolution. By Monday, I'm going to give you the answer. Well, I'll give you the answer, and I'll give you the reason. And that is this: guess what? Both creation and evolution occurred to get us here. We went through an energy phase, which created the energy field, and then we went through a physical phase, which then complemented that energy field, and we are complements of a field. And so the point is, instead of everybody fighting each other, creation, evolution, they go, stop this polarity which is destroying this planet. There is no polarity. Creation and evolution both had to occur before we got here. And so this is an important insight, because it gives us information about a field, and it gives us information about our physical expression in that field. Okay? So, when did evolution start as a science? Well, everyone thinks Darwin, and I go, no. 50 years before Darwin wrote his book, this guy, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, wrote the first theory of evolution, the first scientific theory of evolution. And if you understand what his work is, it turns out that it is the most accurate understanding of evolution, because the Darwinian theory is one of the most destructive beliefs that have come to this planet. It's all based on what? Survival of the fittest and the struggle for life. Life is not a struggle until you make it that way. Life is not necessary to be a struggle, but we have been programmed. There's a lot of money in there. You know, it's interesting. Here we're back to the barbaric situation of a war. And I go, who's winning in this war? The arms dealers are winning in this war. They're selling arms to both sides. They don't care who's killing each other. And what we have to recognize is this is a barbaric way of trying to move into a future where we are really the creators. And this is, to me, so important. So, what did Lamarck come up with? Well, he was the first scientist, as I said. He is officially the first scientist with a theory of evolution that we're living by. And what did he recognize? One of the things he recognized is that organisms fit the environment. They fit so beautifully. For example, you don't find polar bears in Africa, okay? You don't find orchids in Antarctica, okay? And what he noticed was that organisms and environment are in a lockstep interaction. And the significance about that is he didn't know it at the time, but his science is the newest science today. It's called epigenetics. And we're going to talk about epigenetics. And you go, well, what's epigenetics? genetics. I go, the program you've been given is genetics. And I said, what is that? Well, the story of genetics is that your life is controlled by your genes. And I said, well, wait, as far as we were teaching that, and I was teaching in a medical school, I'm teaching students what? I'm saying, oh, genes turn on and off, and in the process, they control your characteristics. And it started out, first genes were just about the physical characteristics. Then all of a sudden people started to say, no, genes control behavioral characteristics. No, genes control emotional characteristics. They're always looking for a gene to fix something. There was a guy once, and he published it, and it was hard for me to accept this without laughing, but he said, there's a gene for happiness. I said, how do you find a gene for happiness? He said, well, I looked at all these unhappy people, looked at their genes. Then I looked at all these happy people, looked at their genes. And guess what? They have better genes. And I go, you mean my happiness is not dependent on me, but it's dependent on my genes? And I said, what if you're the recipient of a sucky happy gene? What are you going to do then? Whole life be caught up in this. And the reality is, guess what? There is no gene associated with happiness. I'll give you a better one. There is no gene that causes cancer. There is no gene. The fear is the belief in the gene. And if you believe that you have a cancer gene, then guess what? You're going to manifest your belief. And this is so critical because so many, especially women, get the bad news of the breast cancer gene. Angelina Jolie, this young, beautiful star, what does she have? She has her mother die of breast cancer, her grandmother dies of breast cancer, her father's a doctor, and says, you know what, you're going to get breast cancer. So she has a double mastectomy, thinking, oh, if I remove my breast, I will be safe. No breast cancer. Her father never explained that the same gene also causes uterine cancer and ovarian cancer, so she didn't do the full hysterectomy on top of that. But I didn't give a damn because you were thinking that the genes were controlling this. And nobody ever said to her, 50% of the women that carry that gene never get the cancer. I said, what is the meaning of that statistic? And the answer is this: possession of the gene doesn't cause cancer. It's possession of the gene and not living in harmony with life that causes cancer. When I change your life, you have to change the character of your life, and cancer will go into remission. Except if you have fear. Fear will create and manifest something to be afraid of. And hope and joy creates something that will manifest and give you a wonderful life. And all of a sudden I said, well, what's this about? I said, it's epigenetics. And you go, again, what the hell is epigenetics? Well, when I was teaching in medical school, we were teaching genetics. What's that? Oh, the genes unfold and determine the character of your life. I say, think about what I was teaching, because I didn't think about it for a number of years until I stopped and said, wait a minute. We tell you that the genes you got, you didn't pick them. They came from your mother and father during conception. Okay? And then I said, but the genes control the character. I said, but if you don't like the character, can you change the gene? No. And then, of course, we add on top of that, the genes turn on and off by themselves. We were teaching you to be victims of your heredity. And people fall into that, and the whole life gets concerned about, oh my gosh, my father died when he was young, and my grandfather died when he was young, and oh my God, I'm going to die young. And it's like, what, you're programmed? And the whole idea about this is completely wrong. I'll give you an insight, and then we'll talk about it later. A gene is a blueprint to make the proteins of the body. The proteins of the body are the building blocks of the body that give you your physical and behavioral character. And I said, the genes are blueprints. And I go, so what's the relevance? So I say, go into an architect's office, and she's working on a blueprint. And you ask her, just lean over her shoulder, excuse me, is your blueprint on or off? She's looking at you, what the hell are you talking about? There's no blueprint, there's no on and off. Precisely. Genes cannot turn on and off. They are blueprints, they're not self-actualizing, they have no control. And yet we have given all the control of the genes and then made you the victim because then you didn't pick the genes and now you're stuck with these genes. And the fact is, so what's the difference? Well, genetics is the belief that genes control your characteristics. I said, well, what about epigenetics? evolution in science in the last 200 years? Epi? Yeah. Give you a story. Maybe you can see it. What do you think we call skin in the medical community? Epidermis. So what does epi mean? Ready? Above. The skin is epi, above the dermis, which is a layer underneath. Now I said the new science is called epigenetics. I said, what does that mean? I said, this character is under the control of epigenetics. And I say, that means this character is controlled above epi, the genes. Epigenetics, above the genes. I said, well, what's above the genes? Your consciousness. You, without even knowing about it, are controlling your genes. And then, but I program you to be a victim. And the moment you're programmed to be a victim, guess what? Victim means powerless. And then we program everybody, you're all powerless. Well, if I'm a victim, then what the hell do I need? A rescuer. Who's going to come and help me? I'm a victim. And I say, your friend is at the pharmaceutical company. And I go, they have sold you on the belief that they are the heroes of this thing. They are the biggest damn problem on this planet. People don't recognize. In the U.S. alone, 300,000 people die every year from prescription drugs. Oh, but we have a war on drugs, don't we? Those illegal, those evil drugs. How many people they kill? About 34,000. We have a war on 34,000, and 300,000 people, you know what they say? That's the cost of doing medicine. Well, that's too damn expensive. And we don't need this anymore because when you understand you are controlling your genetics, that's what it all comes down to. You're controlling the character of your life. But if you don't have any idea that you're doing it, then other people will program your life for you. And you've been programmed to be victims. Everybody believes, oh, I can't do this, I'm not powerful. Well, Lamarck came and told us that it's our interaction with the environment that is creating evolution. And this was really so cool because in 1809, took away from the belief that the church was saying that God was controlling you, your little marionettes and the strings of spirit are calling you up and down. And the fact was, he said, no, that genes, well, he didn't know genes at the time. He said specifically, environment is controlling your heredity. And that became so critical. And yet, what was so critical about it? How did Lamarck even get a chance to say that in a world that was controlled by the church? Well, because when he said that, the church was kicked out of France by Napoleon. And all of a sudden, people had other ideas, started to come up with these ideas. And this is what brought Lamarck up from the bottom, up near the top, because of his ideas. And then I said, then what happened? Oh, Napoleon lost. And then guess who came back? The church came back. And when the church came back, what do you think happened to Lamarck? Who's Lamarck? And he got lost because he was too heretical for the people at the time. So evolutionary theory seemed to get lost for a period of time. Matter of fact, it was, 1858. Everyone says, oh, but Darwin is 1859. I go, that's the issue. Darwin did not come up with a theory of evolution that he ultimately wrote about. I go, what do you mean? He was working on it for years. And then his teacher, more or less, he was a groupie. And he started following the scientists at the Royal Society. And the significance about that was he was going to be groomed by the upper class to become the guy who provides a theory of evolution. And the point about that was, before he did that, a guy out in Malaysia, Alfred Russel Wallace. Well, who the hell is Alfred Russel Wallace? Well, in 1858, well, let's start a little earlier. In 1855, Alfred Russel Wallace wrote this paper on the law which has regulated the introduction of new species. And what he was talking about was an evolution. He was talking about where do new species come from. And this really upset Darwin a lot because Darwin was being groomed to be the evolutionist. I said, what's the difference? Darwin was upper class and Alfred Russel Wallace was lower class. I said, what was the significance? I said, the leadership of the upper class in Victorian England could not abide by the fact that some lower class person came up with something as great as a theory of evolution. So Darwin got a warning in 1855. Here's the paper that is going to start showing that evolution occurred. And guess what? The paper that was then sent to Darwin, and this was sent by Wallace to Darwin, and it was on the tendency of varieties to depart indefinitely from the original type, which is the evolution of all these different things from early organisms. And he sent this to Darwin, and he asked Darwin, and this was 1858, he asked Darwin, he said, if you think this is a good idea, would you submit it to the Royal Society? Darwin had a breakdown. He actually had a nervous breakdown. Why? He was the guy who was being groomed by the upper class to give the theory, and here comes a lower class guy with it. So there was a manipulation. It was called the delicate arrangement. It was a manipulation of science. And manipulation occurred when Darwin was shown that this guy just gave the paper on evolution. This is what this paper is, the theory of evolution, okay? And then what happened was what? Well, they submitted the paper, Darwin and his friends at the Royal Society submitted the paper from Alfred Russel Wallace. But what's the delicate arrangement? And the answer is, if you see the paper right here, and this was the Ternate paper in 1858. This is the one that Darwin received, okay? And he was asked to introduce it. So at the Linnaean Society, here's the article on the tendency of species to form varieties and on the perpetuation of varieties and species by means of natural selection. By who? By who? Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. You say, so what? I go, in science, the name that goes first is given the honor. And therefore, all of us have then said, Darwin came up with the theory of evolution. I say, Darwin did not come up with it. It was Alfred Russel Wallace. And you go, well, so what? I go, there's a whole different attitude. Russel Wallace comes from the lower class, Darwin from the upper class. Okay? And here's the glass half empty, glass half full. Listen to this. Darwin said it's survival of what? The fittest. The fittest. And guess what Alfred Russel Wallace said? It's the elimination of the weakest. Now, they both say the same thing. Now, let me give you a thought question. There are two planets you can live on. The Darwin planet, which is based on survival of the fittest, or the Alfred Russel planet, where it's all based on the elimination of the weakest. Think about it for a second. Which planet would you like to live on? Okay, that's enough. I'll tell you now. The answer is this. Survival of the fittest is a struggle. It's a struggle to always beat the next one, beat the next one, beat the next one. The competition that we face in today's world is predicated on Darwinian theory. Alfred Russel Wallace said, it's not competition. All you have to be is not the weakest one. Hell, it's so much easier not to be the weakest one than it is to be the fittest one. And so what's the difference is we bought into a theory that is really pushing us to compete, and it's a life and death competition, survival of the fittest. Now, here's an interesting concept, and you're ready? The word fit, it means capable of surviving. Fit, capable of surviving. And I say, what did Darwin say? He didn't say survival of the fit. He said survival of the fittest. I said, what does that mean? I said, well, there's the fit, then there's those that are more fit, and then there's those that are the fittest. I said, what is this rank? What is the rate? The upper class call themselves the fittest. And then what about the fit, the lower class? They were capable of surviving. He said, no, I don't care about the lower class. It's survival of the fittest at the expense of the lower class. That the lower class was the feeder layer to keep the noble people up on the top. And the relevance then, they didn't give a damn if you were capable of surviving if you weren't in the upper class. And now, and we still talk about that, survival of the fittest? No, by definition, it's survival of the fit. And all of you who are in here are the fit. So that's what we're looking at. But Darwin comes up with the origin of species by means of natural selection. When did he come up with that? 1859. When did Alfred Russel Wallace publish his paper? 1858. And I go, what's the relevance of this? And I go, he changed the meaning of evolution. This is a life and death struggle that you face when you go outside here. And they just throw you away. If you're not the fittest, they don't care. And this is completely a whole job done in Victorian England, where the upper class was separated from the lower class, and the upper class was given all the advantage. And right now, that advantage has come down to 1%. 1% of the people own all the rest of the people in this game that we're playing right now. So Darwin comes up with it. And Darwin's evolutionary theory is a two-step process. You ready? Step number one, a random mutation. Mutation by definition is random. So that means an organism, two organisms mate. Let's say they're two dogs, and they mate, they have a litter of puppies. And I say, almost all of the puppies are expressing the same characteristics as the parents, but occasionally there's the runt of the litter. I said, what happened to that puppy? Well, there was an alteration in its heredity. And I say, so what? And I say, well, then what if you took the runt of this litter and mated it with the runt from this litter? Guess what? Then you have a whole species of runts. And the idea about that was, what caused the change? A mutation which is accidental. I go, if that's the drive force of evolution, I said, then why the hell are we here? You ready? The answer is simple according to this. A whole bunch of accidents. We're here by accident. I say, is there any purpose for us to be here? I say, no! It was shaking genetic dice. That's just the way it rolled out. You won the crap game. And it's become a trap game, and think about it. But the reality is what? There's no direction, there's no meaning to evolution. It's all the result of accidents. And then when a genetic accident happens, it can either make the individual stronger and more fit, or the mutation can make them less fit. So how do we know what's going to happen? Part 2, Darwinian evolution, is called natural selection. Nature will select the strongest ones to go on and eliminate the weakest one from the program. So I say, then what's the difference between the two? Lamarck said, we got here to complement nature. As nature changes, we complement and change with nature. So there's a lockstep interaction. Darwin's theory goes the other way around. Darwin's theory says, hey, there's a whole bunch of accidents, congratulations, you won. And the significance, there was no meaning for life when you look at it from a Darwinian perspective. It's all accidental. Okay? So, we have two theories of evolution, but actually it's not the theory of evolution. Evolution was already determined. Lamarck determined evolution. I said, then what's the difference between Lamarck and Darwin? And the answer is, what's the difference between them is this. How did evolution occur? Why did evolution occur? And the significance here is, Darwin didn't define evolution, Lamarck defined evolution. The difference between the two is, what is the mechanism of evolution? So we shouldn't give Darwin any credit for finding evolution because it was already 50 years earlier in the scientific journals evolution occurred. So we live with Darwin. I said, so again, what's the difference? I said, well, Lamarck's evolution is based on the nervous system responding to the environment. So the nervous system is the interface between the environment and the genetics. In contrast, Darwin's theory was saying, no, it has nothing to do with the environment, it has everything to do with genetics, heredity. And I go, well, there's a difference between these two. Is evolution based on expanding the nervous system, or is evolution based on expanding the genetics? That's what it comes down to. So in the story of evolution, let's look at it this way. It's apples and oranges and bananas. What do you mean? I go, there are different topics here. I say, what do they represent? Well, let's look at the difference between them. Okay? Apples is the theory of evolution. Did evolution occur? Yes or no? Oranges, the mechanism. How did it occur? And the bananas represent how do you measure evolution. Now, let's look at it historically. And I go, okay, Lamarck, 1809, Darwin, 1859. Lamarck, what is he? The founder of evolution. Darwin did not find evolution. He got a 0 on that, okay? The mechanism of evolution. Lamarck said it's the action of a person or an organism living in their environment and dealing with the environment. In contrast, Darwin attributed it to the heredity, the genetic mutations that occur. So I said, well, you measure evolution, how do we measure it? I go, well, if you're a Lamarckian, then you measure evolution by how developed is the nervous system. But if you're Darwinian, you measure evolution by your genetics. And there's two different ways of looking at life. Is it the evolution, is it our nervous system, or is it our genes? Well, that's what separated the two. I said, well, how does it work? Let me know. Well, here's the point. A body is made out of proteins. That's the building blocks of the cell. There are 100,000 different proteins. Each protein requires a gene blueprint to make it. So we have 100,000 different proteins. And I said, then what about that? I said, a protein, just give you the word. Pro is primary, teen is part. They were recognized a long time ago that the primary part of your whole life are the proteins because that's what you are. You're a protein mechanism. Okay? So, at the time, let's go back to Darwin for a second. He talked about heredity. Did he know about genes? Nope. They had no understanding of genes. Actually, he called something gemmules. And he said, well, what the hell are gemmules? He said they're like little units, like little paint drops. At each part of the body, there's a gemmule for the hand, a gemmule for the elbow, a gemmule for the shoulder. Each part of the body, he said there was a gemmule that controls it. And they were like paint drops, so that if two people mate, their gemmules, when they come together, are like paint. They mix together, okay? And that was the intention. So it was an idea, but there was no understanding of genetics. It was just something like paint drops running through our body that are passed on to the next generation. But Gregor Mendel, now this is what, 6-7 years after Darwin, he's working on flowering plants. He's a monk in Austria. And what he noticed was this. He started with a white flower plant, and a red flower plant. And he mated them together. And guess what? The offspring were pink. Well, that exactly fit what Darwin said. Two paint drops, red and white, bring them together, and you get pink flowers. Well, that fit the whole Darwinian story until Gregor Mendel did this. He mated two of the pink flowers together. And when he mated the two pink flowers together, guess what? The offspring included pink flowers, but also white flowers and red flowers. I said, wait, that can't happen. How could the paint separate again? They got mixed to make pink. How can you separate it? The answer is you can't. So what was the point? Gregor Mendel said that the hereditary units are particles, that they're units, that they can come together and share a character, but they can separate again. It's not paint mixing with each other. The point about it is this. If the general story is correct, then guess what? We should all be gray individuals. Because if you keep mixing all the colors and mixing all the colors, ultimately you get gray. Apparently that's not happening, okay? So, Gregor Mendel throws a new insight. He said the hereditary units must be individual particles because they maintain their characteristic, okay? So, now let's look at it this way. Isaac Newton gave us the insight in physics that there's a mechanical and an energetic universe. That's a big emphasis of Newtonian. We have two realms, the invisible realm and the physical realm. And he talked about them not being interactive with each other. We'll talk about that in a minute. So according to Newton, the body is part of the physical realm. Then we have Darwin. And Darwin comes in and says hereditary factors
are responsible for the traits that result in the characteristics which result in evolution. And then we add Mendel, who says that these hereditary traits are from discrete particles. And that set science on the path that said, what is heredity? We got to find out. Well, the first thing is it's particles. And they're discrete particles. Where the hell are they? What are they? So we didn't have a name for them, not gemmules. I said, so what was the name? Well, Genesis elementary particles. But that's such a big title. Guess what? They shortened the title. What did they do? Well, they got rid of that. Genes. Genes are Genesis elementary particles. Genes are what they were looking for. But nobody had an idea what the hell the genes were. About 40 years later, August Weisman, a German scientist, was looking at cells growing on a glass cover slip so he could see through the cells. And he saw that when a cell divided, that there were structures in the cell that occurred in the middle of the cell before it divided. And these were threads, little thread-like structures. And he called them, because of the color staining that they took up, they were given the name of chromosomes. Somes are bodies, colored bodies, chromosomes. And that's what, and he said, when the cell is going to divide, they double the chromosomes, and then each daughter cell gets a set of chromosomes. And they started to connect them with mutations. They started going, oh my God, the chromosomes are the hereditary unit. So now science is getting more focused. They said, oh, in the nucleus are thread-like structures that are containing the genes. But the chromosomes are made out of two chemicals, made out of 50% DNA and 50% protein. The question is, then which the hell one of those is the hereditary unit? Well, guess what?